sports. This is AM 560, The Answer.
Top of the morning, Dan and Amy. Would you buy stock in the Chicago Bears if you could? 312-642-5600, turnkey.pro answer line, 64636DA, turnkey.pro text line. There's a resolution, which means nothing, but a resolution, it's an idea to model the Chicago Bears after the Green Bay Packers and have it be a nonprofit public corporation. That's a way to keep it in Chicago, according to one Alderman George Cardenas.
Yeah, who wants to buy into that? But the McCaskies have owned the Bears forever. They're not going to give up ownership to the city of Chicago and to the people of Chicago. So I don't know does he think eminent domain that they can just city council and the mayor could just come and take
the
Bears away from them?
No, that's not going to happen. I don't, but maybe as a thank you to Bears fans for suffering through the McCaskey ownership years, they could gift the Bears to the city and they could set up a public corporation a la what the Packers did 100 years ago. I mean, it's publicly owned, by the way. The Green Bay Packers are publicly owned, but, their shares aren't, like, really worth anything. Essentially, it's like being a VIP member of, like, a Packer booster club. You sort of have the share you bought for $250 or whatever it was. I think that was the price, like, in the most recent stock offering a decade ago or so, but whatever. But I mean, the shares can't be resold except back to the team for a fraction of the price. You get it's not like common or preferred stock, no equity interest, doesn't pay dividends, can't be traded.
Oh, really?
No protection under securities law. It's no season ticket purchasing preference either.
Really?
You basically get an invitation to the annual meeting and an opportunity to purchase shareholder-only merchandise.
Oh, like T-shirts
or merchandise
and
at
gadgets?
shareholder-only prices. Yeah,
things like that. Okay.
So I mean, it's an affinity play. I mean, but it is different because it's governed by a committee. The only compensated person is the president of the executive committee. That's how the Packers works. As a problem right now because the NFL requires single ownership or ownership by a small group. At least one owner must have a third of the ownership interest. So you'd have to work around the NFL. The reason the Packers could do it is because their corporation was set up 100 years ago, predating this NFL rule, so they're grandfathered in. The Bears wouldn't be. But, I mean, it's just interesting, the sort of the desperate measures that the city is contemplating or putting out there as a way to keep the Bears because they know the Bears are leaving, and they probably understand that the Chicago Sky is not going to fill that void.
Oh, hey, now. Hey. But Chicago Fire could.
For more on the top, yeah, right. Okay, John Cass.
Soccer.
For more on the topic, we're pleased to be joined by Jim Iuorio, Fox Business contributor and proprietor of Brandt's in Palatine. Jim, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
Thanks for having me, guys.
What do you think? What do you think about that novel idea from one of our deep-thinking aldermen?
Here's the problem, and I've heard a couple different aldermen speak, and some of one guy came out and said we shouldn't let the Bears move down tonight. What is implicit in that is that a lack of respect for any sort of private property if it disagrees with what the city thinks. They have to remember that it's now, by the way, full transparency. I live in Palatine. I have a restaurant that's 3 miles from the new site of the Bears, so I am staked in this more than most people are.
Right.
So would I like the Bears to move to Arlington Heights? Of course I would. So that being said, I think I can still speak unbiased on the topic. Anytime government starts talking about restricting private property rights, realistically, you can boil it down. There's only 3 main functions of government, national defense, infrastructure, and property rights. Education, things like that, they took all that stuff on over the last couple hundred years. That's a basic tenet of it. If they fail on that, they're failing completely, which, by the way, surprised they're failing completely.
Well, it's not if. I mean, the Bears are moving to Arlington Heights. And
how do you know this 100%? Because I don't like to get my hopes up too much. I really want this to happen. I mean, they bought the property.
The Jim Iuorio
they
retirement
bought the property.
Plan.
Yeah, and then they've got casinos so they can have gaming as
good.
part of
I'll go
their,
with you. Good.
But Cardenas is trying to
let's
get
have some fun.
Cardenas simply wants City Hall to be creative to try and keep the Bears, but there's nothing they can do to keep them. It's over.
Right, and I it's funny to me because to be someone who's so frustrated with the way the city of Chicago has run their business over the last few years, to see them lose the Bears, there's this weird perverse satisfaction. And again, this is coming from a guy who benefits from it. But when you do make stupid decisions, you get stupid results. I mean, everything happens for a reason, but the reason might be that you're an idiot and you have to now suffer the consequences of your decision.
Yeah, absolutely.
Good.
Look, I mean,
we're all gloating.
If the Bears were actually a publicly traded company, I would buy stock in it, not because I'm confident what the product they're going to put on the field, but because that's such a growth play to be in Arlington Heights with the ability to build a Bearsville and to not have to do business in the city of Chicago and negotiate leases with the Park District and so on and so forth, to build a bigger stadium, to have more amenities, so on. I mean, it's a great growth play for the organization. So from a money-making perspective, it's a no-brainer.
Right, it's 330 acres that the train comes right to. There's highway access on just about all sides. So I mean, it's definitely a layup in my opinion. So, but again.
All right, so somebody who presents more of a threat than George Cardenas's resolution to the seizure of private property by the public sector. And this is just indicative of the mentality of this administration. I'm talking about the Biden administration now. Again, their currency exchequer nominee, this Moscow State University scholar, Saleh Omarova, and the things that she said in the past, of course, are coming out now because her nomination is in real trouble because she's got a couple of Democrats that aren't going her way either. But this is what she said about her vision for private banking. Her vision for private banking is there will be none.
Imagine what would it be like if instead of being just a public option for deposit banking, this would be actually the full transition. In other words, there will be no more private bank deposit accounts, and all of the deposit accounts will be held directly at the Fed. And there are very interesting implications from that thought experiment, for example, with the much more direct and proactive tools of monetary policy, like helicopter money, which is, considered radical primarily because economists really do not know how to manage the issue of what will happen in the inflationary environment when the central bank needs to contract the supply of money. How is it politically feasible for the central bank to effectively take money away from people's accounts?
Mm-hmm. What do you think about that thought experiment, the elimination of private deposits, Jim?
So here's what I think about that, too. And believe me, this is the kind of thing that keeps me up at night. I believe that these appointees, at this point in time, they're going for the least qualified people, the person who will make the other side the most angry. So to a casual observer who doesn't understand that she's an absolute communist, she's said that in the past. That she's put there, and then we people like the three of us who pay attention say she's a communist, and then the other side can look at us and go, "Wow, crazy conspiracy theorist people." So this is where we've evolved to. This is the progress they were talking about in the progressivism, I guess, because this is just it absolutely blows me away. And the things she talks about the government taking over all the banking system is terrifying. It should be terrifying to everybody.
Well, President Biden, they signed the $1 trillion infrastructure bill, and everything's going to be better now, Jim.
My message
we don't have
to the American people is this. America's moving again, and your life is going to change for the better.
Our life is going to change for the better, Jim. Isn't that exciting?
Okay, well, I'm sold. Then he's fine. He won me over. Because he did say, remember what he said, there's no inflation. There's no inflation. There's no inflation. He looked at the camera and he said it like 3 times about 4 months ago or something like that, or it's going to go away. So I think if he thinks he can look at the camera and say what he wants and nobody challenges him. And he seems to be right at this point in time.
Part of the Biden administration agenda here with the socialist tax and spendathon, the $4 trillion in funny money that's pending, is this little nugget, always looking at the housing market. And of course, it's been on fire, and more so because of the inflationary environment. But Wall Street Journal reporting that Fannie and Freddie are expected to raise their conforming loan limits to about $650,000, about $100,000 more, and nearly $1 million in high-cost markets from $800,000 and to $1 million in high-cost markets from $822,000, which is 175 grand more. So this is important because Fannie and Freddie guarantee mortgages up to the conforming loan limit. This government backstop and de facto subsidy, the raising the limits because home prices are up 23% over year, is this the government contributing to re-blowing up the housing bubble that was blown up by these same enterprises in advance of 2008?
I guess here's what blows me away about that. Well, first of all, I would say, of course it is. And when you look at what happened, the run-up, the 15 years preceding 2008, and you thought, that's not that long ago. I'm surprised we're making the same mistakes. And that, by the way, that's an enormous mistake made by the government. But now let's look at the Fed's mistake. You mentioned that the housing market's hot. The housing market is absolutely red hot, and the statistics back that up. Even this month, the Federal Reserve is going to be buying $35 billion of mortgage-backed bonds to support the housing market, which is already dangerously hot and entering into bubble territory. Now, the bubbles can last a long time, as we've seen before. But to ask the question, is the Fed and the federal government contributing to this recreating a bubble? Of course they are. And it doesn't seem like they care anymore. It reminds me of the Barney Frank speech, about 6 months before the whole thing blew up, where he's in Congress talking about, and it's a great watch if you haven't seen it yet. Well, everyone's telling me there's a bubble in the housing market. He says, I think we should roll the dice on this. And these people, they don't seem to care. Because again, then the housing market implodes, and he's the one who gets to form the legislation to apparently, supposedly address it going forward.
Well, right, because so this move is against the backdrop of constricting supply through tax increases, expanding demand through funny money and the launching of new entitlements, and that is going to reduce inflation, we're told.
Yep, that's what I've been told. So to say it's a head scratcher is giving it way too much credit. It's just a blatant lie. Now, I would say that the artificial demand that's been propped up through government policies and Fed policies over the last 2 years is very real, and that's one of the most primary things. But there's actually organic demand that has happened since people seem to come out of their bunkers and see what's going on at the tail end of the pandemic. So that's real too. There's that element as well. But then then you strict the supply as well. This is literally the first day of Econ 101. Demand supply equals inflation. We're boosting demand, limiting supply. Of course, we're seeing that happen. And the fact that it's taken them. Well, it took them like 8 months even to acknowledge that it was here. Right. And then a week ago, when the CPI number came out, remember the stock market got hit pretty hard because it was believed that the Fed now can't ignore inflation any longer with a hot CPI number. But now we're into potentially electing a new Federal Reserve chair, and he's being threatened because he's not dovish enough. So to think that this is going to end soon, I think, is folly.
I want to get your quick take, too, on where crypto is at, where you're at with crypto, I guess I should say, against the run-up of Bitcoin and just sort of more froth over in the crypto space because of what's going on in the traditional fiscal and monetary space.
Well, there's a couple things that I think are really interesting about crypto, and I'm sure I've told you this before, but for the last several years, just 1 day a week, I have an automatic crypto purchase in 3 different coins. I don't know exactly what they are as far as the nuts and bolts, but I know a couple things. One, they're absolutely a hedge against fiat currency. That's what they came about for, because they're telling us that people aren't confident in the stewardship of our currency. The reason I own it is because I own about 10 or 12 different things that are all along those lines: platinum, silver, gold, real estate, and I have a whole dollar hedge portfolio. I should rename it. The government is moronic and doesn't know a good thing when they have it, which is the strong king U.S. dollar, and they are playing games with that. Now, the crypto market's grown to $3 trillion. There's another element of it. We keep talking about the lack of labor, right? So and when you talk about the Fed that's inflating asset prices, there's been 3.2 million extra baby boomers that have retired in the last year and a half. That's extra from what was normally projected. Now I'm getting back to crypto. The crypto, it's a $3 trillion market now. How many people are taking government money and staying home and calling themselves a crypto trader? So I actually think that market needs to implode, and I'm not wishing losing money on anybody, but that market needs to implode to remind a new generation of what risk is, so we don't to avoid bubble creation. But crypto at some point in time is going to get knocked, and I'm in it, and it's a hedge, so I don't mind losing my money, but I think it's fascinating.
He is Jim Iuorio, Fox Business contributor. He's the #1 fan of the Arlington Heights Bears because he owns Brant's and Palatine.
It's going to be great.
Jim, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
Thank you, guys.
You're going to have to get a bigger restaurant, Jim.
We're talking about it already.
See?
I like it.
There you go. And he joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.
This is Chicago's Morning Answer.
Your show keeps me alive during the week. There's nobody I'd rather listen to between 5 and 9 in the morning than you guys.
On AM 560, The Answer.
The Lou Dobbs Financial Report is brought to you by Signature Bank, helping local businesses succeed. Visit signaturebank.bank for your commercial banking needs.
I'm Lou Dobbs. Bankers are expecting bigger bonuses this year. All eyes are on today's new housing report.